The experience of Māori. This section begins with 3 comments, each in a separate panel. Māori must be able to support Māori, kotahitanga, manaakitanga, rangatiratanga, whanaongatanga. Hui participant. Pākehā voice should not dominate everything. Hui participant. We need a Māori DPO and to be a member of the DPO coalition. Hui participant. The human rights of Māori, the indigenous people of New Zealand, are not being fully realised in Aotearoa, New Zealand. Evidence, as set out below, shows that positive life outcomes for Māori are comparatively lower than for other population groups. Tangata whaikaha, disabled Māori, are further compromised and are even further from realising the rights set out in the Disability Convention. Many disabled Māori see themselves as Māori first. Understanding the experience of tangata whaikaha can only happen within the cultural and human rights context of Māori as tangata whenua, people of the land, and partners in Te Treaty of Waitangi, the Treaty of Waitangi. Signed in 1840 by Māori rangatira, chiefs, and representatives of the British Crown, Te Treaty is regarded as a founding document of government in New Zealand. Its articles set out the principles of full participation, self-determination, equality, and non-discrimination. These rights are also set out in the United Nations Declaration on the Rights of Indigenous Peoples, UNDRIP. During public consultation held by the IMM, some participants asked why the rights of Indigenous people are not explicitly provided for in the Disability Convention. In answer, it was noted that the Disability Convention can be viewed through a UNDRIP lens, which offers an Indigenous perspective. For example, Article 18 of the UNDRIP states, Indigenous peoples have the right to participate in decision-making in matters which would affect their rights through representatives chosen by themselves in accordance with their own procedures, as well as to maintain and develop their own Indigenous decision-making institutions. The commitments set out in Te Tiriti and the UNDRIP have not been upheld, resulting in systemic cultural and economic impoverishment for Māori. Māori have a higher rate of disability than the wider population, and tangata whaikaha fare worse than non-disabled Māori in many social and economic indicators. In comparison to non-Māori, Māori have a lower median income, in Note 19, higher rates of poverty, lower life expectancy, in Note 20, higher rates of suicide, in Note 21, and disproportionate rates of child removal by Oranga Tamariki, Ministry for Children, in Note 22. Tangata whaikaha have lower labour force participation, lower income, higher unemployment, greater likelihood of inadequate, damp, cold housing, higher rates of discrimination, and lower rates for self-assessed health status of excellent or very good, in Note 23. Tangata whaikaha are also subject to disproportionate rates of compulsory treatment under both the Mental Health, Compulsory Assessment and Treatment Act 1992 and the Intellectual Disability, Compulsory Care and Rehabilitation Act 2003 in Note 24. Historically, Māori have not been given the right and resources needed to implement self-determined solutions to address these inequalities. In 2018, the IMM-UNDRIP invited the expert mechanism on the rights of Indigenous peoples to New Zealand. During this visit, community members raised the following concerns, in Notes 25 and 26. Māori self-determination is not adequately protected by legal or constitutional arrangements, and there is a lack of true partnerships in decision-making, with the balance of power, resources, authority, and world views tipped towards the state. Information in Te Reo Māori language is lacking, and there is only a very small pool of trilingual New Zealand Sign Language interpreters, which impedes participation by Māori deaf in cultural events, hui, and discussions. The impact of institutionalization and removal from whānau, family, which Māori continue to experience at higher rates than non-Māori, are enduring, including the loss of opportunity for tangata whaikaha to grow up in whānau, hapu, sub-tribe, and iwi, tribe, and within their culture. This is currently the subject of a wider health services claim to the Waitangi Tribunal. End note 27. Māori now have one of the highest per-population suicide rates among comparable countries. End note 28. Rates are particularly high among Māori youth, specifically young Māori men. The latest statistics show that rates for women and older Māori have increased. There are entrenched inequalities in education, housing, justice, health, employment, and income. The disability system transformation has not implemented a whānau order integrated and self-determined family approach to well-being approach. End note 29. The Whānau Order Interface Group have been talking to Te Pūtahitanga o Te Waiponamu about aligning system transformation with the Whānau Order Integrated and Self-Determined Family Approach to Well-Being approach. Dr. Paula Therese King authored a report on the health status of tangata whaikaha in preparation for Stage 2 of the Waitangi Tribunal Y2575 Health Services and Outcomes Kaupapa Inquiry, Disability. In its conclusion, she states, End note 30, this report has demonstrated that significant inequities exist for Māori with lived experience of disability in health outcomes, in terms of exposure to the determinants of health and well-being, access to health and disability services, and the quality of health and disability care received, including health and disability system responsiveness. There is clear evidence of multiple systemic and structural barriers affecting these health outcomes for Māori with lived experience of disability. These systemic barriers have been created, maintained, and reinforced by the strategies of the Crown. The resulting effects include redistributing resources, preventing meaningful involvement, and a failure to monitor outcomes or respond appropriately to inequities that have emerged. In other words, the significant inequities which impact on Māori with lived experience of disability have not occurred through happenstance. Māori with lived experience of disability are not actively prevented from participating in policy and legislative developments, but neither is the opportunity to participate guaranteed or actively sought by the Crown. Nor is there evidence that reasonable accommodations and supports are put in place by Crown organisations to support participation of Māori with lived experience of disability. This amounts to something close to the exclusion of Māori with lived experience of disability from health and disability sector decision-making. During consultation hui to inform this report, both tangata whaikaha and non-Māori expressed concerns about the lack of and pressing need for the voice of tangata whaikaha to be included in decision-making, perhaps through a formalised structure such as a pan-impairment Indigenous Disabled Peoples Organisation. A need to build knowledge of and commitment to te tiriti-based practice among disabled peoples organisations and the DPO coalition. The dominance of medical or Western models in, for example, psychiatry, neurology and paediatrics. The lack of respect for, funding of and access to kaupapa Māori, Māori customary practice, practitioners' services, and a lack of cultural competency among support staff. These outcomes suggest a failure to uphold Article 30 of the Disability Convention, right to participation in cultural life. Persons with disabilities shall be entitled, on an equal basis with others, to recognition and support of their specific cultural and linguistic identity, including sign languages and deaf culture. Māori with disabilities have experienced alienation from their culture and language, including the loss of stories of leadership by tangata whaikaha. The following excerpt from Dr. Paula Therese King's report to the Waitangi Tribunal illustrates this. End note 31. It appears that Māori in the ancient world who had impairment were people with godlike power and godlike status. They were known for the talents that they possessed, not for what they didn't have. As time progressed, this notion appeared to change. The need to remove barriers to full citizenship is recognised and addressed, to an extent, in the Tangata Whaikaha Leadership Group's Māori Disability Action Plan, Whaia Te Ao Marama, Endnote 32. This plan's key aim is to achieve full participation by tangata whaikaha in Te Ao Māori, the Māori world, including access to culturally appropriate supports and building cultural competency within non-Māori disability support services. There is no agency specifically contracted to support its implementation. In contrast, the Ministry of Health has contracted with a non-government agency to implement Whaewa Ora, a Pacific Disability Action Plan. It is hoped that increased investment as a result of the 2019 Wellbeing Budget will improve Māori mental health and well-being, including lowering the rate of suicide. As part of the response to the report of the 2018 Mental Health and Addiction Inquiry, He Ara Oranga, Endnote 33, the Ministry of Health signalled that work with Māori leaders will be key to the suicide prevention strategy, with 1/3 of funding to be dedicated to Māori-specific initiatives. Māori have expressed mixed views on the extent to which the He Ara Oranga report and suicide prevention strategy reflect te tiriti rights or respond adequately to the unequal well-being outcomes. The IMM needs more quality disaggregated data to properly monitor outcomes for tangata whaikaha. Evidenced inequalities show that disabled Māori are far from enjoying universal human rights on an equal basis with others, and even further from fully realising their rights as Indigenous people. Bishop Manuhia Manu Bennett saw te tiriti as the promise of two peoples to take the best possible care of each other. Endnote 34. Available statistics and the day-to-day lives of many tangata whaikaha suggest this promise is yet to be fulfilled. Recommendations. The following recommendations alone cannot address these systemic inequities. All recommendations within this report carry the expectation that they will be implemented in ways that give effect to Indigenous rights to self-determination and full participation. With that in mind, the IMM recommends that the government 1. Take immediate steps to progress a mechanism by which the voice of tangata whaikaha can be formally included in all disability-related policy and legislative development and any Crown Māori partnership initiatives. This recommendation reflects and supports Recommendation 11 of the IMM UNDRIP's report regarding the implementation of the UN Declaration on the Rights of Indigenous Peoples in Aotearoa, New Zealand, June 2018. Endnote 35. 2. Act to implement Recommendations 3 and 6 of the IMM UNDRIP's report regarding the implementation of the UN Declaration on the Rights of Indigenous Peoples in Aotearoa, New Zealand, June 2018. Endnote 36. 3. In addressing poorer socio-economic outcomes for Māori, specifically identify and address the disproportionate impacts of these inequities on tangata whaikaha.